Test, test. Ready, begin.
Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
Wish we could get a few other countries to do that too.
Hmm.
We need it.
Yes, okay, roll call. Clint Nelson here. Bill Stewart.
Here.
Oh,
Timing is impeccable, Bill. Peter Hensley,
Here.
Patty Townsend,
here.
alternate Chad. There he is. And we have a quorum, so Chad, we don't need to seat you for voting, but we hope you stay. We enjoy your company. Are there any additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda? We'll start with the staff. Any changes?
None by staff.
Okay. Any committee members have any changes?
No,
Okay. So all those in favor of approving today's agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? No. Okay. Public comment. Do we have any?
We do not have any members of the public present. Mark.
Okay, so we can skip reading the Zoom stuff and move to number 8, approval of minutes. These are the minutes of the February 13th meeting, which was some time ago. All of you have copies. Are there any suggested changes or corrections to the minutes?
Sir. None for
If
me.
not, I'm looking for a motion.
I move we approve the minutes.
Moved by
Second.
Bill Stewart, second.
Second.
Pete Hensley, seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Minutes are unanimously approved. Okay, comments and requests. We'll start with general manager comments. Jake?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Apologize, you might hear some things twice because we were here yesterday, but we had a communications committee meeting yesterday. Just a quick update and the board will hear this at the upcoming board meeting, but our crop swap program, first month out of the gate here. I think we opened up on April 29th. And so we just got kind of an update. We've been getting regular updates as, you know, kind of verbal as they've been going along, but we got a kind of formal, hey, here's all from the person who's administering the program. And it's been a very, very good first month. We got just for Rainbow Water, 35 applications through the grant program. 12 of them have already been approved, which means they went through the application process. Site inspection already occurred, and funding's reserved for the upgrade, the agricultural upgrade. The 12 that are approved totals just under $250,000 in grant funding that's going to go out to our agricultural customers. And on top of the 12 that are approved, we have another 23 in process. So there's 35 applications in process. The way we had started the program was, you know, because there's, I think there's 6 agencies total now that are participating. Wanted to give everybody an opportunity to, you know, have a shot at the funding, right? And so what we did was an initial reserve amount of 200,000 of the grant funding. And then the remainder of the, you know, 5 million is basically in a pool of first come, first serve. I think for us, it's like 2.2 million. So about $1 million on top of it. And so we've already burned through our reserve funds in the first month. And we're into the first come, first serve. So we're taking our piece of the pie on those. We're way out in front too. If we had a scoreboard up, Rainbow Water would be top in all categories. We won't publicize that at the board meeting, but anyways, it's been I think it's really promising too. I mean, obviously for us to have some real early success with the program, credit to Carlene and Amanda. They've done a tremendous job just reaching out to to all of our customers and forming interest lists and really got a jump on it early. But also I think it's a really good sign because our customers are reinvesting in agriculture. And so, and that was even going into the program, that was kind of the one thing in our back of our minds is, is there enough there? And it sure seems like there's a lot of demand there. So we've already started talking about pursuing additional funding, just considering how well it's gone here in the early phases. So whether it's more from the state or Fed or whatever, but as a group, already kind of talking through some of that, like this looks like a hit. And so if we can keep it rolling, we're going to keep it rolling. So really good news there. And at the board meeting, we will provide some of the stats and things, but those are the big ones. One more thing I will say. The majority is avocado rootstock upgrade too. That's the majority of the application. So this is old trees replanting with new trees, more drought tolerant, salt tolerant kind of rootstock. That's been the majority of the applications. There's some other things, crop conversions and mixed in there and that, but about half of our applications were the just avocado rootstock. So people reinvesting in avocados. So it's anyways, good sign. Detachment update. We continue to make progress on the pump stations. They're actually on schedule. And we've worked really hard. I say we, it's Chad and the team have worked really, really hard. Really coming up with some creative solutions to things that really could have derailed the schedule. Things we've dealt with for the last couple of years, right? Long lead items, things of that nature. And so really coming up with some creative solutions to make sure those things arrive on site in plenty of time to meet the schedule. And so far, so good. I think as far as physical items, I think we've got everything kind of identified and now, yeah, and knock on wood, and coming in on time. Power to the sites is still another thing. That's probably one of the hurdles that we're pushing hard on. But right now, everything's on schedule. That would mean, they've got, I think their schedule goes to about mid-October, October 13th, 20th, somewhere in there, which kind of gave us that timeline, sometime from November to January, looking at actually, signed, sealed, and delivered on that one. So obviously, it's a big focus for us. It's exciting to see the pump stations. At some point, we'll bring a presentation and show some pictures and things, but there's been really, really good progress made on that front. As far as the ops plan and dealings with both County Water Authority and MWDA, that's ongoing. The ops plans are pretty much finished. So we're just waiting on a couple of items from the County Water Authority as far as transfer of the facilities and things like that. Things we agreed to in that settlement agreement that we're just looking to, kind of finalize the sign off on those. But as far as the technical provisions of the operations plan, I think everybody's in agreement on all the points. So we do have some work to do with Metropolitan to they're going to ultimately, or our thought was they would ultimately take over the two of the meters that are now County Water Authority owned. They already own and operate actually, or own two of the meters, the ones that are on the west side, but the two on the east side were the County Water Authority. So our thought was we're going to purchase those facilities from the County Water Authority, but then we would turn the meters over to Met. So there is a process there that has to be done for them to accept those facilities and that kind of thing. That's probably going to take a little bit longer because they've got to work things out with the County Water Authority, but not going to delay anything on our end. They've already committed to kind of an interim condition where, yeah, we're going to use existing meters and take the bill from them and that while we work out the long-term kind of water supply agreement. So that's ongoing too. We're actually having bi-weekly virtual meetings with that whole group to continue to hammer out those details. So anyways, everything's going pretty well there. And we're on schedule. So that's the good news. As far as some of the rate discussions, those are continuing down in at the County Water Authority, I think we reported before, had completed their budget process. I don't know if you heard the Met news, but we'll save that maybe for another day.
Hmm.
Oh no, okay, yeah, maybe after this meeting. But so they're done with their budget. The Water Authority, they have a public hearing scheduled for next week to take up their rates. The alternative that was being put forward was what ended up being 18% rate increase. And that was actually accomplished by pushing up some debt financing. So they were preserving some cash by bringing up some of the debt financing. Because I think originally it was one of the 20% options, but they were able to lower that a little bit by doing some of that. Well, that's the current proposal is the 18%. The several of the delegates from the city of San Diego, not, voice their displeasure with an 18 or 19% rate increase. And so they were working on what do you call it, some creative ways to try to lower that increase. One being like fronting cash payments of fixed fees. And so there's some sort of program that's they're trying to develop to do that. So you pay it up front and you get some kind of a discount based on rate of return. And it was interesting. So we'll kind of see where that goes. But anyways, high double digit rate increases is I think what they're looking at next week. We'll hear more on that. So yeah, it's kind of rippling through now. I kind of saw a chart yesterday of kind of the impact to the various agencies. And obviously just it follows generally the rate increase. So, 15, 18%, depending on how much treated water, raw water you take and things like that. But pretty big hit. And I know, just from some of the North County agencies up here, they've got till January to deal with it. But already, really kind of struggling with their boards and that to kind of find a path through here, Valley Center and Uwima, especially some of the smaller districts, similar to us. So I think that'll be big news as it kind of continues over the summer and fall. But that's the update on that. A couple good things.
Jake?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is all of that discussion about that large rate increase, are we going to be able to, is that for rate increases that will start in January?
January 1st.
So if we do our thing right, we get to skip that, right?
We avoid that. Correct.
Yes. Okay.
We avoid that. And so if you read your newsletter, which just came out last week. Yeah. Or yeah.
Started going out.
Started going out
Depends on their billing cycle.
Okay, yeah. We highlight that. But there's a whole, I don't know, it's like a 2-page, we spent a lot of time on the article. I'll just say that. But there's a long article that really, talks about the things that we've been talking about over the last few months as far as our budget, kind of where we're headed. And then, it does tout some of the benefits that, we are likely to avoid, that the impacts of that increase, which would be double digit to our customers. So, there is talks of that in our newsletter, and we probably hear more about that next week, the board meeting too.
Just a point, not only that, but if the turnover occurs on November 1st, as the schedule indicates, or just before that, how much do we save just purchasing water from the new agency just in November and December?
There would be additional savings. It would be kind of more one-time-ish, but because we've already kind of established the budget based on that January 1st, but there would be some additional savings.
Less in those months because we don't buy too much water, but let's say 500 to 700,000 per month.
Just At the old rate.
It's a lot.
At the old rate.
Yeah,
Free money.
half a million or so.
Yeah.
Say that. So, so it's important. If we can finish as early as we can. But you know, it is a construction project, and you know, we don't want to jump the gun and do something that, yeah, because once we do it, we do it. So that's it. Couple other just things of note. We did receive some funds from the Bonzel Oaks development. So they.
Stealing my thunder.
Oh, I didn't know if you had that on there. or not. I should have asked. Yeah.
Stealing thunder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll let Rick talk about that.
Okay.
And on the waterfront, just and Ahmed, if you want to play my video, I actually did some personal reconnaissance up in the I went up to Sequoia, but we did a bunch of hikes and things like that. There is a lot of water coming down the mountains right now. And this is Kings River, just the Middle Fork. So before the Kings River comes together, is it not going to play? I was up here 5 or 6 years ago, and I bet you there was half or less water coming down. You know, we did some of these same hikes and that kind of thing. You might not get to see it play, but just yeah. Beside being great views and all of that, it was really impressive the amount of water that's coming off those hills right now. As you know, the state itself is in a good water position. Most of the reservoirs are full. The big ones up north, Shasta, Trinity, that you know, big reservoirs up north, Oroville, all near completely full. The one thing that has been a little bit stymied this year is had some environmental restrictions getting across the Bay Delta. I guess it was particularly burdensome this year. They had some steelhead that decided to roam right in the area of the pumps that you know take it down to the delta, and so they've had to really restrict pumping. So you do see reservoirs everywhere full except for San Luis. That's the one where they're transfer from north to south. So hopefully that gets going here in the very near future as the water's still flowing, get that down south and it'll continue on. But yeah, if you look up and down the state, the reservoirs are full. Diamond Valley's 91% full. So the water situation is really good. The other good news on that one, they came out with some numbers. You know, they really the state made a big effort last year to reduce the restrictions on groundwater recharge. So if they're, you know, with the excess water that was coming down, they were trying to put it everywhere they could. And they actually said they had a 4.1 million acre foot addition in groundwater, which hasn't happened in years, right? You've seen the Central Valley declines and all that kind of thing. So it's really the first year they've actually seen it come back up. So anyways, lots of good news on that front. The state water project allocation is 40%, which means Met's got plenty of water again. So they probably would have access to put in storage. I don't know how many places they have to put it, but so you could probably, I don't know how likely it is, but you know, maybe another deal like County Water Authority did with Met last year, where they leave water in Lake Mead and the federal government comes in. I think they're looking at those same kind of options again to kind of use some of that capacity to help out there. So that's all I've got today.
Any comments or questions for Jake's update? No. Okay, we'll move on to Rick, Finance Manager's comments.
Just a few points from me. So good news and not quite as good news. The first one Jake was going to bring up is the Bonzel Oaks development closed on their CFD. They're doing their first 59 units of a multi-phase development. And so that translated to 1.2 million in actual cash in our bank account by the end of May for capacity fees. The not so good news is I already counted on that and all the financial projections. So it's good that it actually happened, but it doesn't bring us above where we thought we would be. The other is our system demands are tracking up. So the end result of that, so May peaked up quite a bit. And June is also looking strong. So far in June, we're looking about 20% more in system demands than we were same time last year. Overall, I think that puts us at or above the 10,000 acre foot sales mark we were hoping at. Mostly because it'd be stronger, but our sales numbers represent meter reads that kind of look backwards. And our system demands are right now as we're entering water into the system. So that could indicate a stronger sales summer for us as we get into summer. On overall investments, so as you know, this was a discussion point earlier in the year. We've changed investment strategies and are taking advantage of essentially government security money markets. So high yield savings accounts, but for governments. And our average interest rate earlier in the year was about 5.5%. We're still doing good. It's still in the 5.3 to 5.4. So things came down a little bit, but well above 5, which is very much helping us out. The Fed is only expected, if they cut rates at all, maybe a quarter point this year is the common consensus. So we should still be above 5% all the way through the end of the year. You will see in next reports that you see on my finance summaries. So I did have, we elected to sell 2 securities of some of the straggler securities that we were holding on to because we would have to sell them at a loss because the market dipped and we're able to sell them at a price in which, not at the moment, so you'll see a small book value loss, but by the time that they would have normally matured several years from now, and that was the point, we'll either break even or make money by reinvesting it in our normal sorts of investments. So it was a way for us to get more liquid funds when we need them now, and take advantage of what was really only a 2 or 3 day dip. And so took advantage of the market to do that. But you'll notice those on the future reports. I think that was it for me, unless there's actual questions on the.
Any questions, for Rick?
No, I'm just really impressed that you're managing those funds.
I know.
Diligently and positively. It's great.
My staff don't appreciate having to record all of the activity as we're moving things around, but it works out well for the district.
Great, good. Okay, committee member comments. We'll just go around the horn. Pete, you got anything?
Good.
Patty,
No,
Bill? Nothing for me?
Can I say one thing for
Yes?
on the committee's behalf? That I missed in my comments, to be honest. I just wanted to say thank you for the participation in the budget meetings, for the CIP and the budget meetings. I don't know if I've said that before, but it really was, the feedback and engagement we got from both the committee and the board. I mean, it helped us a lot get, especially, me being fairly new to the district, Rick being fairly new to the district, to be able to kind of team with this group, and some of you have been around a lot longer than we have, to kind of shape what we've come up with to date. I just wanted to share my appreciation. So thank you all for doing that, for taking the time to do it.
Well, thank you for that. And back at you, I think the quality of the staff presentations was outstanding. The amount of footwork that was done, the analysis, the evaluation of options, presentation of options, and most importantly, openness to feedback was, I think, very, very positive on the part of you guys and the staff, and it allowed, I think, committee members to feel like they did have an opportunity to make an input and to have an impact on what is being done on behalf of ratepayers. And it certainly strengthened my confidence in the fact that the Rainbow District is very committed to the committees and to their input, which I know is very rare. I don't know that other districts do this, but it certainly heightened my sense that you guys care and that you want to hear and you're open-minded. And I think open-mindedness is just absolutely critical, especially for a district like ours where we've got some challenges right now. We do. And to hear multiple points of view and then to be willing to take action based on that, I think is just really extraordinary. And I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to second
Second that. Everything you said, absolutely true.
Well, thank you.
I had one comment. I made the same comment at the other committee meeting yesterday, the Communications and Customer Service Committee, but there was an article recently in the Union Trib about the real crisis statewide in available, experienced volunteers to serve on committees, commissions, and bodies just like this that are so important to government in California. It's a virtual crisis, from one end of the state to the other. One of the reasons I think that we have strong participation is the very thing that our chair just said. We have a great structure for the committees. The committees are actually involved. Their input is sought. We really carefully select people. The board doesn't just appoint people willy-nilly. They vet them and they make sure that they got something to contribute here. And the whole structure of it has been formalized and has become part of the decision-making process. That doesn't happen everywhere. Unfortunately, a whole lot of boards and managements of various government entities, they really don't want to hear that. And so that discourages qualified people from coming to the fore. And so I think there's a lot of credit is due to the organization and how it treats with the committees as well. So, but that was an interesting article and one that I think that we continue to have excellent committees here.
Okay, well, to wit, on the idea of having people willing to be of service, we move to item number 10, appointment of committee vice chair. And we need a vice chair for our committee, and so floor is open. If somebody would like to express their personal interest in being the vice chair, or somebody wants to make a nomination.
I nominate Bill.
Second.
Okay, so Bill, are you willing to pony up?
I'll pony up.
All right, Bill will pony up. So let's have we can do a acclamation vote here? Okay, all those in favor of electing Bill as vice chair of the committee, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no.
No. Oh, wait a minute. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, unanimous. Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much for being willing to step up into a leadership role like that. Okay. Okay, and now we get into the meat. Item 11, review of the reserves policy. All of us received a copy of this presentation in the packet that Therese sent out to all of us. And I'm guessing that Rick, you're gonna have something to say here?
Yes,
Have at it.
already. Get the clicker on it when you chance. So this item should look very familiar to most of you, at least those who were able to make the April 9th joint board and committee meeting. And so at that meeting, an overall comprehensive financial plan with a lot of different elements was presented. And one of the key elements of that whole comprehensive plan was this: what should we have for reserves moving forward? And so this discussion, compared to the other discussions, which was what do we have in debt and what do we need to do in debt and what do we need to do for rates and other sorts of other big financial issues, this one centers on the idea of how much cash investments should the district be holding on to, and are we too high, too low, and what do we do about that? And that's implemented in a policy that's in the admin code. And so this particular item is really to look at the language that implements everything we talked about last time. So I'm not going to get necessarily into too much of the details because a lot of that was reviewed. Unless there's interest in any of them, then we'll dig in as much as you all want to. And so on that note, focusing on the policy. So in the packet, you should have seen essentially what are all the wording changes to the policy to implement this, at least that are being proposed, and then a clean version with that but also some charts that kind of show how do we actually calculate these things for those that love the details, and then where if we implemented this, sort of how much of our goal have we filled, depending on whether we look at what we think we're going to start next year at with cash or how we're going to end next year with cash. And you kind of see the difference of, well, just where are we with our goal and all of that. And so that's mostly for reference. If anyone was just interested, I won't necessarily go through those in particular. But so as I was mentioning, this item is to look at the policy language, but there was a lot of interest in this discussion last time. And so this is a great opportunity to get clarification, get questions, or if there's any changes, it's going to the board next week. So this will be sort of the last chance to get into that. Overall, the topic of reserves is not a new topic for the board to be dealing with. Actually, a big element of the rate study that led to the adopted rates last year was based on how much we should have in reserves. And so I just wanted to point out that what this policy is saying and what that study said are relatively consistent. So that policy or that analysis by the consultant said we should have about 33 million as a goal in the next budget year. And I think we're saying 31. And so what there is as a difference is sort of how we calculate the targets and the nitty gritty. There are some reasons for that, and more sort of overall structure of the policy. How do we implement this? What do we do if we're lower than our targets? What do we do if we're higher? How do we get there? These kinds of things. So overall, just to kind of highlight the key issue on what do we have cash reserves? And so probably the key point I would show here is on the top line, provide financial capacity. We have to meet our services. And so you can either do that one of two general ways. You either have cash on hand to pay for everything we need to do to provide service, or if we don't have enough cash on hand, you're going to someone who does have cash on hand. So you're banking and other lending opportunities. And so it's really a risk discussion on how comfortable the board is at a policy level on how much we want to have or how much we want to rely on debt. I'll put it that way, when things don't go how we're expecting to go. And so the more cash you have on hand, the less you need to go to the lending markets to do that. At the extreme, you would cash fund everything. And so in one sense, that seems good. But that means you have a lot of current customers paying for costs for things that, especially capital assets that are very long lived. And so then there's the argument, well, debt service kind of breaks that out. So the people that are benefiting from it long term. So debt isn't always bad, but you want to find the right balance, which is what this policy is getting at. The policy itself, not just cash reserves, there's a few key points here I wanted to reiterate. Is the policy is probably one of the most important policies in my mind from a legal perspective when it comes to defending ourselves on the rates that we implement. And so one of the number one things, if you're ever sued over your rates for Prop 218, which is very common these days for water districts, is there's very little argument over what a district's costs are. There is argument over how much cash you should have. And so the only thing that a district has to stand on is, well, we have a policy that says how much we should have, and we have reasons. And so if you have a policy, that's your defense. And if you don't, let's say you had 100 million in cash and the customer says, well, do you really need 100 million? And if there's no policy, that's usually a pretty strong argument in a court. And so this is our way to defend our rationale for how much we need to have. And it's one of our strongest defenses. The other part is staff have to implement this. So the easier it is to understand on why we need as much as we do and sort of how the better. So some policies get very, very complex. You see those usually in larger institutions. This one's actually trying to be pretty straightforward, and that's what we're going with. So what is a little bit different about this particular policy, and this is mostly born out of my experience working with a number of different agencies, is it's important if we say we have 10 million in the bank to go, well, one, is that enough? And two, what is that for, right? Have we met a goal or not? And so the most common question I used to get from previous boards was, well, how much do we have in the rate stabilization fund? Right? Because that meant, how much can we use to offset rates this time where you're being asked to raise rates? The question with that is, should you have any money in a rate stabilization fund if your most critical things, like being able to pay your bills, have no money in that particular fund? So that's where the sense of prioritization comes in. You meet the most critical goals first, and then you go down the line. And usually rate stabilization is in the middle of the pack, not the first thing on that. And so what this does is it says, we get ideally a little bit of leftover money in any particular year, because things never work out exactly as planned, between what we're bringing in revenues and everything going out with expenses and debt and all that. So if we're building up savings, where do those savings sort of go? And the first category is for the most critical savings goals, which are working capital, which is enough sort of money in the bank to pay the bills, because things fluctuate all the time for us, especially this district. Seasonally, we bring in lots of money in the summer and almost nothing in the winter, and when we get property taxes and things like that. You also want to make sure you have enough on hand to pay the things that you promised to pay. And our biggest bills, besides paying for water, are debt service. And so having enough to pay for debt. And then you get into just risk balancing. We know that whatever we project is not going to be right. And so, for instance, water sales, if we think we're going to sell 10,000 acre feet next year, that can come in at 12, 13, 14, or 8, 9, or 6. And so do you have enough on hand to handle if your sales come in lower? If more main lines break than we thought, these kinds of things. And so by having enough on hand to deal with the unexpected, or maybe expected, but just not budgeted items, that's what your rate stabilization fund does, is it handles the unexpected to cover the things that we just didn't budget for, but have to do anyways. And then the second part of that is really on the facility side. Is there's a number of times, and you all have seen this working on the committee. Usually the most common thing is bids came in higher than we thought, and something broke that we didn't expect to break, and now we have to replace it sooner than we thought we did. In either case, we didn't budget for that. And so where does that money come from? Well, that would, in this line of thinking, be a capital facility replacement fund. And so those two really, if those are funded, can handle a moderate amount of unexpected things happening that typically happen. But we just didn't set aside a specific amount in the budget for them. And the last category is a good to have. It's not necessarily what the district is shooting for, but if we somehow got savings, we could say, yeah, it's good to probably hang on to that if we want to. And those cover really two things. One, I call it special projects or major CIP fund. If you're looking ahead and there's a really big project that we're going to do and you don't want to debt fund all of it, certainly it doesn't fit into our normal budget, you save up for it. And so you set aside money for that. And there's sort of a special fund for that. That's purely case by case. And then lastly, emergencies is a big one, specifically fire and earthquake for us. So on the earthquake risk, and I'd covered this last time, but sometimes it's important to reiterate. If there is an earthquake, our underground infrastructure, which is almost all of it, is not insurable. And so we have no protection. So whatever costs we bear to replace it and fix it on an emergency basis, which is going to be very expensive, we are going to have to come up with one way or the other. And even if it happens to be FEMA eligible, that tends to take 3 to 5 years to get some of your money back, not all of it. So it probably poses one of the greatest financial risks. The trouble is, how do you guess how big of one and how much damage is going to happen? So there's a balancing act with saving up for that. Usually to strike the right tone, it's have something set aside to get you working, to buy you time to then go out and borrow an appropriate amount to then stretch it out. But you need something on hand to deal with the immediate emergency and kind of deal with the cash flow with FEMA. And so that's what this reserve would do if we had it. Say it's probably good to hang on to some of it for that reason.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
And the fact that I'm asking the question does not in any way imply that I have a problem. I am just curious about it.
Mhm.
Under the capital facility replacement reserve, item number 4.
Yes.
Is this the common way that people calculate that by looking at the total value in situ of the infrastructure and then taking some kind of a percentage of that amount to calculate what the number should be? Is that, I'm just curious that when I saw it, like 1.3%, I guess that's the reflection of 75 years of a useful life. Is that?
Yes.
And is that the normal way that districts do this thing?
The short answer is, I think this is innovative. They do something. So they do something. They calculate some way. The most common sort of approaches are a year or some multiplier of years of historical depreciation. Or you look at your 5-year CIP and go, how much do we expect to cash fund over 5 years, and do some percentage of that. The trouble I found with those, and this is where the trying to make a policy easy to implement and frankly not move around a lot, these targets move around, is depending on the projects in the next 5 years. If you have a large project, we're technically saying we need to really, really bulk up the reserve, and then it comes right back down again. And so that it varies a lot, and that doesn't help with setting rates because everybody just throws that out the window and goes, oh, it's just temporary. Or on historical depreciation, these are numbers often for a water district. Our historical costs are being set 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and they don't represent at all the cost to
Correct.
replace the assets now.
Right.
And so that's where this new sort of approach we're looking at. We're going to do our best to estimate for what it would take to replace the system now. What's the real cost of the system? It's like a liability. And then go, well, we need some portion of that's representative. So it does adjust year by year, but adjust by like an inflationary number. Or if we have a major new capital asset addition, it'll like the pump stations, it adjusts a bit. But that's us trying to find something that represents the size and cost of the system. And I'll note when we did the numbers, it was kind of interesting. Our cost today roughly is $1 billion to replace our system. So that's the magnitude of when things break. Right, 1% is pretty significant for us. The whole reserve by itself, everything added up, is only 3% of what that facility number would be. And you see that when we do large projects like the pump stations or Thoroughbred, those by themselves are 20 million plus. Thoroughbred was. So one project is in the tens of millions. And so you compare that to what we're looking at here and you start seeing relative numbers.
And the $11 million that's called out here for the current estimate of that would be $11 million over and above whatever is appropriated for capital improvement projects for the
Yeah.
year, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Since we're on that, can I comment? I'm not a member of the committee, but because this drives rates, I wanted to participate today. And I also had questions about that one, that line in particular. We've been corresponding a little bit. So I know one of the things that you had recommended was making sure that depreciation amount is at least reflected in the next cost of service study. But I'm wondering too, if there's a way that this 11.2 million in the case of the water cash reserve, if that could be somehow looked at, could you look at what the reserve is in the capital reserve? And if it's already at 11 million, maybe this is something reduced. My concern is that the 31 million just seems like pretty high to get through. I keep talking about these 4 years when we've got the payments to the water authority, and maybe coming up with some sort of modified approach that is a little bit more conservative than this for those 4 years. So we're not, having to raise rates, because once we set this in policy, then that guides all of the other things that follow. Just want it to be very conservative. That's just my viewpoint.
I'll say this too, because, I've had the same thoughts and discussions and those kind of things. I think one of the important points on, this reserve discussion, I mean, you can see, I appreciate the tables that Rick put together. Year one, we're actually going to be dropping a bit more, right? We're going to be dropping a bit more. And the policy really calls for, hey, during the budget season, we're bringing the reserve discussion back, kind of each and every time. And I think when you get to stabilization, am I right that we were talking about it like a 10-year window? Yeah, we're talking about a 10-year window. So again, these are, Rick did a great job of laying it out. These are kind of guiding us, but I think year to year, obviously there is that portion that the board's going to have full discretion on,
Mhm.
where are we at with the reserves? Where do we want to get, by next year? And is it worthy of a rate increase? I think that's,
Yeah,
yeah. And I think here, even the way it's described, when you get to that second column, it's really discretionary. It gets really discretionary. I mean, at the
Mhm.
liquidity level, we're saying you probably need to do this, right? We're going to need to do what we need to do to get here within a short amount of time because the district is at risk. But once you get to that stabilization, that's again 10-year window, and let's what we may consider it, but it's full board discretion.
right. Well, and I think had the reserves been funded in the past, then the issue with paying Oceanside wouldn't have been problematic. The issue with issuing $10 million in debt wouldn't have been, before us as well, because that's reflected here as well,
Sure.
right? So I'm supportive of the reserves. I'm just thinking the
Yeah.
4 years that are before us, maybe we're a little bit more conservative in terms of funding it.
I tend to agree, and I agree with you just as a general manager too, not having, our hands tied to, hey, we have to do this to do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
I think this gives us a very long window to kind of meet these things. So
And hopefully to get at what I think is the core of the concern. And we didn't talk so much about this in the other workshop, so I hope it's helpful. Is when we're looking at the 5-year plan of meeting all of these goals, this goal, the debt goal, everything else. So when I talked about in the future years, sort of the last 3 years of the whole 5-year period, an average of about 4% was what I thought we would need to do for the district's needs. The general thought is we should be raising rates in those years to cover our increase in cost. The savings that comes from detachment, really you have a unique opportunity in this year
Yeah.
to kind of sock away some of the savings till you hit the goal. And then you've met your goal, and now you have all of those resources to sort of keep rates low on an ongoing basis. So you're not raising rates to fund this. You're using the savings portion of the savings over the 5-year period
But
to
the
fund this.
future years, if this policy is in place, it guides then, what's in the cost of service study and
Right.
then what's recommended for rates. So that's why it's like, it's a really important
Hmm.
thing,
Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just gonna say, we're at the apex of the investment in detachment. 5 million a year, uh, to make it comfortable for the politicians to let us do this was basically all you're talking about because it wasn't in the law, but it was practically necessary. But that's a burden. It is also a burden that we've had to update all our pump stations, and some of that was just it was way past time. It wasn't all new. It was just upgrading to the things we had to do because we had to do them. The old pump stations were a joke, coming into this, and on and on. And the big project with the sewer station is the other kind of shoe that dropped, and it dropped right in the middle of all this. But a lot of help though from developer fees. We get that. But given all of that and taking a look then at these projections, and as I look at the bottom line, which is district-wide cash reserve targets, the minimum target was at about 13 million. We end up with about 11. That's 84% of that minimum target. That's pretty close to a worthwhile minimum. I was really surprised as I took a look at these numbers that we got that close. And it's going to happen so fast that we're going to be we're going to be saving money starting in January and continuing. I don't think it's going to take that long, to get this back up toward, something closer to what you project to be the median. And the median is, we're at 35% of that target, but you could certainly see where we could be there within 3 or 4 years, 5 years.
Yeah, and that is the projection, is that we would get to that
Exactly.
target number by the end of the 5 years.
That's great. I was going to make one other comment, and that is, the idea of that, districts with the best credit rating, are 1.7 times their operating budget, in reserves. Well, that asks us to reserve 70 million.
Oh,
So,
we-
but yeah, but we got a pretty good credit rating because they are looking at the big picture with us, not just where we are right at the moment, but where we're going to be given our future projections that are solid. So I just think we're in great shape. We're in good shape here at the moment.
Yeah, and that effort in showing the 70 million was mostly to point out
Yeah.
this was not a cookie cutter trying to do what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
Looking at district specific risks, how we do debt. It is different, but thinking that we can live with a lower number, at least as we see it now. And so just sort of that context. So I'll go very briefly through these just as mostly a reminder. So each of these represents an individual goal that builds up to a total goal, which are these targets and minimums and maximums they talked about. But the key points are when we say working capital, the new target is really 3 months worth of our budget versus 2 months. That's the change there, which is very consistent with what the consultant had recommended and included in the study. On the debt service side, we didn't really have a specific target for debt service. We just kind of acknowledged that when we've issued some debt, we've said we're requiring ourselves to set aside money. So some of our debt has that restriction. And so what we're saying here is we should have 1 year's worth of debt service on hand, and we give ourselves credit for what we've already set aside for portions of our debt. And so the net of that is what we should set aside with unrestricted funds. On rate stabilization, very simple, that we're looking at 10% of what I'll call normal revenues. You don't count big bumps of not so typical things like grants or capacity fees, but our normal sort of fee and investment income and that kind of revenue. So 10% of that, both for water and wastewater. Capital facility replacement, this is where we had already talked about looking at the total replacement value of the system and 1 year's worth of depreciation on that. On the emergency side, that just replicates because you're really talking about the size of the system. So if we're going to fund that one, it follows the same type of target as the capital facilities, but you're kind of adding another year onto the depreciation. And then lastly, the special projects, it just depends on what the projects are and whether we want to set aside some cash funding for it. So this would be similar also when we talk about, there was a water resources sort of study reserve that we had, new water resources study reserve. That's what the board had done in the past to stock away some money to look into new things. And so that would be reminiscent of this kind of reserve. It's very board policy directed. If we have something on the horizon, we want to save up for. And so lastly, just to show where it all ends up, and I think this is the key slide, is you have where we are currently with our official reserves. That's on the left where it says current target, and it totals a little over $8 million, mostly because it has no specific target representing our capital facilities, which is our biggest, sort of liability we have to contend with on risk. And so looking at the new range, so our minimum would be about 13. The maximum we would justify is 44, but we're really targeting about 31. And so as long as it's within that range between 13 and 44, we would say we're pretty good. If it goes below the 13, we would take some actions to try and bring it up pretty quick. That's pretty low. And that's actually right about where we were in the last few months. And if it goes above 44, we're probably going to say either there's some projects we've deferred and we should really move up, or that we have one-time expenses let's use some cash for one-time expenses and not put that on rates in the next rate study, something like that to bring it back down. But overall at 31 million, this represents less than a year's worth of operating expenses, about 9 months. And so compare that to the typical highly rated reserve we just talked about. And the other point, and I didn't mention this before I close up, is and in some districts, usually cities, actually, when we talk about reserves, the thinking is very specific to funds. We have a fund for this, we have a fund for that, and you have sort of an amount per fund, and you can only kind of do what that fund's purpose is with that money. With this structure, as a special district where we really don't have those restrictions, we're really looking at how much do we need overall as a whole district, and what's the range that's acceptable. And so no matter what is technically in any particular bucket, it can all be accessed for whatever is necessary
Fungible.
yeah. And so that's why this really sweeps more instead of funds to targets. You know, these are goals, and where are we compared to the. And so that's what getting ultimately this would be taken to the board. And so looking for the committee's thoughts on whether to recommend it as presented.
I will ask the question of, this item is titled Review of Reserves Policy. Are you asking for the committee to make a recommendation to the board with respect to adopting this policy today? Or is this purely an informational item?
It's before you if you want to make a recommendation.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
to get that opportunity.
I have a nitpick on the page 9 of 76 in the packet. I just am wondering if maybe we have a typo
Very likely.
in the item description. You see where description there? And it says number 1 establishes reserve targets as a range rather than fixed single goal and sets a goal time frame for when and.
Yes, it's a typo. I've already fixed it.
Thank you.
When to meet the goal.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And then
Told you it was a nitpick.
turn the page over and item 7 says provide a plan for how to meet funding goals in reserve levels are below targets. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
that's supposed to
Yeah.
be on or something.
Yeah,
It's
if
different.
if the goals are.
Yeah. Right. If reserve levels are below targets.
Um,
So those are we just want to clean it up for the board, you know?
One of the changes that I thought might be worthwhile is, if we do a budget adjustment or mid-year adjustment, it might be appropriate to have that as part of the mid-year adjustment.
Mm. Are you thinking about changing that in the policy? So the way I wrote it was to be flexible, that no less than annually.
Yes.
Yeah, but certainly we can.
Yeah.
Mid-year budget review.
I don't know if that's typical that a mid-year
We-
budget is done.
Yeah, we did that last year. I think it was right before. I think we did it right before the mid-year budget review. Yeah.
I wouldn't think that's normal if there are no problems. If we're
Right.
expecting things, that's usually when we highlight them, either at the mid-year review or before that. And so but that was intended. If we needed to do it more often, then we
Yeah.
would. But you'd at least be seeing it once per year,
Mhm.
in the budgeting season. Yeah.
Well, with regard to this item, is there a motion from the committee about recommending this to the board?
I would like to move that we adopt the staff recommendation to adopt an ordinance amending administrative code chapter 503, section 503-220 cash reserve policy.
Okay, so Bill has moved that we recommend that the board approve this. And is there a second?
Second.
Pete? Okay, Pete seconds. So all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Hi.
All opposed, no. Okay, so there we have it.
Thank you. Great work.
Thank
Very, very interesting piece of work. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. The next item, number 12, review of the monthly finance packet. I guess that would be led by you and your crew, Rick?
Yes, so this is for information. I covered the highlights I thought would be the most interesting in my comments. So if there's any questions on the report
Good.
themselves.
Cash benefit from the reinvestment of the funds, that is reflected in the treasury report, the 94,000 compared to 66. Is that what that's about?
Yes.
So in 1 month, we cleared 30 something more than
Mhm.
good.
Yeah, in total, I would estimate at these cash levels, you're looking at an additional benefit between maybe 300,000 or so a year by being more active in our cash management. And so that's a direct benefit to the ratepayers.
And when we look at this chart,
Yes.
the uptick in the red line is what you were referring to earlier, that we seem to have been moving more water out to customers than we had in the past, because that slope of that line is a little bit steeper than the black line, right?
Yes, we had purchased, I think, roughly 1,400 acre feet in May alone. Some of it was to put water into storage. But that is leagues higher than the couple hundred acre feet we were doing just a few months prior. So that, yeah, May begins the big uptick.
And the red line appears to be touching the 10,000 acre feet already. So we're going north of that unless we sell no water in June.
All right.
Yeah, understanding that there's a delay. So this number represents sale or
purchases.
water
Purchase.
purchases we're doing from Water Authority. And then, we do our meter read, but that represents prior months worth of activity. So our sales take a little bit, a month or so to reflect this. And then I didn't know if it was useful, but we did change around the formatting of like the usage by class chart. It's that stacked bar chart. Generally the idea is the green represents agricultural uses. The blue at the bottom are more of your domestic uses. And so you get a quick visual of just how much demand changes month by month in the different categories. Try to make it a little bit more user friendly there, but. And then in following months reports, we did have a request. We show our expense activity, each check and credit card. And some of the details were limited before, like we do lots of little purchases for Amazon for miscellaneous supplies. And so getting some more detail on that. So we'll be able to implement that probably in the next couple of months. And so I was glad to see if we could do something about that to be more transparent.
Oh, okay.
Any comments or questions on the monthly financial report? Okay, then we are at number 13, suggested agenda items for the next meeting. What's your prognosis? Anything?
So one thing I will bring up is August in particular, but July as well, we're prepping for audit and closing out the year. Obviously limited staffing, and I don't have any particular items to bring in July or August that I see now. So it's whether the committee was comfortable with going dark until September.
Well, if there is no business to bring to the committee, I mean, the staff puts a lot of time in preparing for these meetings and
Yeah.
I don't personally see a need for you guys to invest all that energy if we don't really have anything to discuss. Patty, you okay with that?
Yes, and I have a question. Are we using a different auditor than last year?
Not a different firm, a different team. We swapped out teams for new ones with fresh eyes.
Okay.
And that
Good with
swap
that.
out was based
I
on
mean, they
whose
made a big move
recommendation?
last year.
So the firm we did through a full RFP process. And their next year or this audit coming up will be their last year under that RFP anyways. But we did have some concerns with maybe not the most diligence and missing a few things last year, like the Oceanside payment and some other things. So I did want a new team with a fresh pair of eyes to look at things.
Okay.
Then it,
Could we ask you to circulate like you do before each of these meetings, the monthly financial to us, just so we can
Mm.
keep apprised of what's going on during the interim?
Yep.
We're not going to meet in July and August. That's fine with me, but
Yeah.
everybody's
it's a good
busy.
suggestion, Bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And if something comes up, I mean, obviously, if there's something business that needs to be taken care of, then but tentatively we'll plan on that. There's nothing urgent at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in September, you'll get the big update, which is how do we end the year?
Yeah.
And so we'll have those numbers by then.
In a preliminary audit.
And preliminary, yes.
So that's great.
All right, so it seems to be a consensus then that we will, unless subject to the staff's decision, we'll go dark for July and August, and we'll be back together again in September.
Yeah.
Looking at the end of the year reporting and whatever other items may be appropriate. Fair enough?
Yeah.
All right, well then, with no further comments, we will adjourn this meeting at 2:07. We did it in an hour. Wow. Good.
All of that.
QED will quit and eat dinner. So there you go.
No.
It's not happening as a goal.